Hello everyone, I'm Crow77, and recently I've gotten a lot of requests on videos for defense. Now, while I can't do a video to cover everything you need to know about defending, there's only so many hours in the day, I did want to start covering some defensive topics. So today, we're going to talk about Sakigiri and how it relates to saving safe tiles. So first, let's start with the basics. What does Sakigiri mean? In short, Sakigiri is making a play that sacrifices efficiency, flexibility, or value of your hand in order to get rid of more dangerous tiles early on, before they can deal into other people's hands. We'll mostly talk about it generally in this video, as opposed to specific point situations or specific board situations. But keep in mind, when you're very far ahead you can, and it often makes sense to, Sakigiri very aggressively. You'll often see players that are 10 or 12,000 points ahead in the last round or two cut non-Yakuhai Honor Dora very early, specifically so other players don't have time to use it effectively. Aside from the occasional Honor Dora cut though, Sakigiri will generally reduce the likelihood of dealing into others' hands at the cost of speed more often than not. You will be less likely to finish your hand quickly. In essence, it almost is exactly the opposite of pure efficient play. So, what are we looking for when we want to Sakigiri something? In general, we want to identify the most unsafe tiles in our hand. Depending on the situation, this can become obvious pretty quickly. Take this hand for example. Normally we'd want to make an efficient play and discard the 7 mon. However, if we notice that the player to our left or across from us is going for a Honitsu hand in Pinzu, then we may want to get rid of a dangerous Pinzu tile instead, most likely dealing the 3 pin. Note that this doesn't necessarily work so well if the player to our right is going for the same hand. They could cheat the tile and advance their hand, so we'd usually in that case rather hold on to it and try to use it when it's part of a good shape like this. This is pretty specific though. The other types of tiles we'd want to look for are tiles that are more generally unsafe, like tiles near the center of the suits or the aforementioned Honor Doras. Take a look at this hand, for example. It's 2 tiles away from Tenpai with good shapes all around. What should we discard here? This one, in my opinion, is pretty straightforward. We should typically cut the 7 pin here. Some of you, especially if you're newer to the game, may not quite agree with my analysis that is straightforward. So what are we really looking at with this hand? In Mahjong, it can be very important to think ahead to what your finished hand is going to look like. If we separate out the hand like this, we can pretty easily see the 5 shapes that we're going to need to end the hand. We have great Ryanmen shapes with the 2-3 mon, 6-7 so, and 2-3 pin. We even have a chance to go for a 1-2-3 Sanshoku if things go well. The only thing we miss out on here by dropping the 7 pin is the chance to draw 8 pin, but even that makes us lose our pair and makes us more likely to end on a bad weight. So in this case, we drop the 7 pin and hold on to the safe honor tiles in case we need to play defensively later. So, let's take a look at this hand. In comparison to the last, we have more value already. 2 red 5s means that this hand is worth a minimum of 3,900 open or usually 5,200 closed. But the shapes aren't quite as good. We do have the 5-6 Ryanmen in Manzu, but only a 1-3-5 shape in Pinzu. What would you discard here? Again, while I think it does depend a bit on point situation and discards on the board, in general, I believe it is best to discard the honor tile here and avoid Sakigiri. With good value in our hand, we want to play more efficiently, especially since we have a few options to break our hand and discard safer terminals if we end up in a situation where we need to fold. When you only have 16 tiles in the wall that can bring you to Tenpai, giving up 4 of them, which is what you do when you Sakigiri the 5 here, is a pretty big loss overall. Now this hand is a bit less contrived, and likely to be something you'd see in a pretty standard game. So what would you do here? In this case, there's some potential value already. You have a decent shot at making Ipeko and maybe Pinfu if things go right. We have a couple extra tiles floating around with the 8-so and 3 mon, exactly the types of tiles that would make sense to Sakigiri if we decide to go that route. Remember though, we want to consider, what does this hand look like in its finished shape? Right now we don't even have enough shapes to complete the hand. The 3-3-4 so will be 1 shape, 5-7 pin will be another, and the 7-7-8-9-9 mon will make 2 shapes. But that leaves us only with 4, and we need 4 runs in a pair, or 5 shapes. If we start drawing tiles to improve the hand and add to our shapes, then it might make sense to Sakigiri. But if it's still early, and this is the hand we have, we better just cut an honor. Now that said, this does have to be early. If this is our hand on turn 12 or so, then we'd better be folding already. Let's take a look at one more example. What would you do with this hand? This is where things start to get a little bit more subjective, in my opinion. But I think it makes sense to cut the 5-pin. Yes, the shapes are bad, and yes, I just spent a couple examples saying that we typically don't want to hurt our efficiency too much. But what happens if we actually draw 4-pin? We end up with a bad shape Riichi Nomi in most cases, where it's questionable if we even want to declare the Riichi because of how low of a value this hand is. But if we commit to Sakigiriing the 5-pin here, we can still end up with Chanta and Sanshoku for a potential Mangan or better with a closed hand. So we aren't really losing much by dropping the 5-pin here, and it allows us to push for that higher value hand even into a Riichi if we draw what we need in the end. And at the end of the day, that's really what we're trying to do with Sakigiri. So, let's summarize. The principle of Sakigiri is to not just discard isolated honors without thinking about it first. Sometimes it makes more sense to slow down just a little bit to be a lot safer in the long term. But despite that, you need to make sure that you don't excessively sacrifice your winning chances and your ability to improve bad weights. There are still more things to consider than I've covered here though. Some questions you'll want to ask. Is the tile Dora? Do we have good value for our hand if we discard the Dora here? Can we use the tile that we're about to Sakigiri to make more Yaku? Is it worth it to do so, or do we have good value already? Are there any opportunities to hold on to good central tiles that might be safe because 2 or 3 other players have already discarded them? Is there anything in the discards that we need to pay attention to and make some tiles in our hand less good than they appear, such as 3 or 4 of an inside shape already being discarded? Remember, at the end of the day, the important thing is to use Sakigiri to strike the best balance you can between offense and defense. As always, thanks for watching. If you have any feedback, topic ideas, or issues, please let me know. If you want notifications of when I post a new video, hit the subscribe button. Have a good one.